Managers were actually using students as technicians to do the work, and nobody was checking their work, and so the ORs started stepping in and saying, no, we don't want students in our facilities anymore. And where other schools are still having a hard time getting students in, luckily for us, we're having hospitals open their doors to us.
Beyond Clean offers a creative look into the inner workings of a healthcare industry committed to getting it right every instrument, every time. Join us every week as we explore the hidden world of one of the most important aspects of safe surgical care. And now your hosts, Michael Matthews, Hank Balch, and Justin Poulin.
This week on Beyond Clean, we speak with Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. Harry has over 33 years in the medical and sterile processing field, and in 2011, he started Central Sterilization Solutions along with his partner James Hoxie to teach the CRCST course for techs desiring a career in sterile processing. They have experienced an increase in the average pass rate from a beginning 65% to 95% pass rate on their tech's first attempts. CSS has also contracted with SPD departments to help hospitals with issues identified by the Joint Commission and other accreditation organizations correct those deficiencies and obtain clearance upon reinspection. CSS is in the process of creating course curriculums for the CIS, CHL, and CER certifications. Guys, I'm really excited because we had a chance to meet Harry at our Isham panel discussion at the 2018 annual conference. It was a great time. He's got an enormous amount of passion for the industry. It's going to be another 2-part series, so this will be the first episode, and it's going to be talking about sterile processing training programs on the whole and an overview. Can't wait to get into it with Harry.
That's right, Justin. Those sterile processing programs are huge movement across the country right now. I don't know if they are leading the way for legislation or if they are preparing the way for something even bigger, and we'll talk about that in the second segment. But I do know that California, and you know, Harry is a California guy, that is the number one state in the United States for downloading the Beyond Clean podcast. So anytime that we can get guys on from California to continue this conversation in promoting a vision for pushing sterile processing forward, I jump at the opportunity. Can't wait to talk to Harry today.
Absolutely, guys. We've talked about multiple times how this podcast at its core is about education, and this is really kind of the cutting edge of education itself within the sterile processing industry. So this is going to be a really good one, and absolutely we met Harry. It's really great to actually have met some of these guests in person, and he is a very passionate guy. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, as a reminder, you can follow Beyond Clean on Twitter at Beyond Clean Info. Also, Facebook.com/Beyond Clean Podcast, LinkedIn.com/company/Beyond Clean, and the Instagram page Beyond Clean Podcast. If you've got a picture that you want to post anonymously on our Instagram page, or if you've got a recommendation for a future guest or topic on the show, simply send an email to info@beyondclean.net. We'll be right back for part 1 with Harry Mullen. Before we get started with the interview, Beyond Clean had an excellent turnout for our first ever panel discussion at the 2018 Isham Annual Conference and Expo entitled Packaging Method Myth-Busting. Our expert panelists for the event included Marcia Fries from Case Medical, Joe Hannibal from Halyard Health, and Barbara Harmer from Innovative Sterilization Technologies. Very shortly, we will be releasing the audio from the event in a 2-part series and want to thank the following sponsors for helping make the event possible. Northfield Medical. The new Northfield is focused on hospital operating room device repair management. With millions of medical device repairs a year, they help hospitals make data-empowered decisions on capital purchases, sterile processing procedures, and staffing. They provide surgical and diagnostic equipment repairs that meet OEM standards and consultation on repair trends, true program cost, and measurement baselines that improve outcomes and supply chain efficiencies. Ascendco Health, your data, cleansed completely, organized intelligently, and visualized brilliantly. Ascenco is an emerging health tech company changing the conversation, enabling sterile processing to achieve and sustain peak performance. Take your first step and contact co-founder and CEO Brian Reed. The team at Beyond Clean is very big on data and analytics, and Ascenco is doing some amazing things. I would encourage you to learn more. Logiquip provides hospital-grade storage equipment to any department in the hospital and specializing in CAD design, space utilization, and inventory optimization. Ready Set Surgical automates the surgical vendor supply chain. Their cloud-based coordination platform consolidates logistics and communication for all members of the surgical team to ensure that every patient has the right equipment with complete documentation at the right time. And finally, Ultra Clean Systems, Inc., born out of a need to provide healthcare facilities with better, more reliable ultrasonic cleaners for their sterile processing departments. Ultra Clean has been leading the industry with efficient designs that provide the most throughput while enhancing patient safety. Ultra Clean also produces Newsflash, a weekly digital newsletter covering a variety of interesting topics relating to sterile processing and infection control, plus new emerging and medical technology, as well as links to Isham State Chapter events and CEU courses. Newsflash also offers a feature article every other week with none other than Hank Balch called The Front Line. Please subscribe to this unique newsletter. Register at ultracleansystems.com under the Newsflash tab. It's free. Joining us now is Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. Harry, it was great to meet you in person at Isham, and now we finally get a chance to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was great meeting you guys in person at Isham this year.
One of the things that you do is you're the Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions, and as we said in the intro, this is a group that is going to help people get past in their certification efforts who want to have a career in sterile processing, not just a job. So let's just set the table and talk about why there is a need for these sterile processing training programs, in your opinion.
A little background, been in the field sterile processing for 30 years now. And years ago, the only way that you could really get into sterile processing is if you were lucky enough to meet a manager that was willing to hire you off the street and train you. Back then, it was fairly simple. The instruments, drills were not that complex. But as the years have gone by, the advancement of surgical instrumentation and procedures have become more complex. And so it's very apparent nowadays that technicians coming into the field need a foundation in the concepts of items such as microbiology and sterilization. Now, as to where there's a need, everywhere in the field nowadays. You have technicians who have been in the field for quite a few years that are not certified. Unfortunately, they've become complacent in their job. And with that complacency, their minds have become locked in and sometimes unwilling to learn. And most of all, unwilling to pass on that information to new technicians that are coming into the field. And they tend to forget that when they started in the field like I did 30 years ago, they had technicians helping them out. And then, of course, why we need certification. There's a greater possibility that as lawyers become more aware of what it is that we do, they can use that against the hospitals for having technicians that are not currently certified.
That brings up an interesting question there, Harry. So are you seeing a trend of more emphasis being put on the education programs due to legislation or due to litigation, I should say? How much of an impact is that really having?
Well, I don't think it's had a lot of impact just yet as far as sterile processing goes, but I think hospitals are more aware of it. I know here in California, the trend is definitely the major hospital institutions have been pushing their technicians to become certified. They are making it mandatory in order to get a job with them that they either have X amount of years in sterile processing, having that experience, or in fact, coming in, if they're coming fresh into the field, that they have to have that certification. California, unfortunately, I mean, we've been in the position for, let's say, surgical techs twice have tried to push through legislation in order to make certification mandatory. And unfortunately, twice the governor has vetoed it with the excuse saying that it's going to cost more money for the hospitals if these people are certified. Well, that really is not a good argument, because hospitals are already seeing that they're better off having more knowledgeable technicians, whether it be the surgical techs or sterile processing. So they're focused more right now on the sterile processing techs. A lot of hospitals are starting to, having these major events, the near misses happening, whereby they need to focus in on the training. For instance, one of my past places, they had a big outbreak where the people were infected by CRE through the duodenoscopes. And so that was just the tip of the iceberg that focused on sterile processing. And then when they started looking deeper, they really started seeing that there was a much bigger problem involved in just the duodenoscopes. It ended up being that, hey, well, we had a problem with rust. We had a problem here. So they started focusing more on education and really started pushing their technicians to be certified. And I see that among other hospitals as well.
So interesting, Harry, that you talk about the hospitals here in California being concerned or fearful that requiring certification will increase cost. And it makes me think about something that Stephen Kovac said on the podcast in the fall, his quip that quality doesn't cost, it pays. And, just that calculus of, okay, maybe pay will increase with certification, but maybe it won't. But the one thing that will increase is the cost of care through surgical site infections and delayed surgeries and canceled surgeries. Those things are hard numbers. Just so interesting to hear that argument, like not only made in California, but made again and again across the country as, I don't know if it's a scare tactic or if it's just ignorance to how the economics of healthcare actually works. But I wanted to key in on the comment that you made about as these attorneys are getting smarter, they may be the ones who start asking questions of these hospitals of, are your sterile processing techs certified? And if they're not, why not? Because the hospital across the street has certified sterile processing technicians. So, why did you decide that that's not important in your field? And I just thought that was a very interesting point.
Well, exactly. And some hospitals may be able to make the argument that their technicians don't need to be certified because they show documentation of the different in-services that they do and the training that they do. But the truth of the matter is, anybody who's been in the field long enough knows that one of the points that hospitals actually fail and get noted during different surveys is their documentation. They have a problem with documentation. They might have a sign-in sheet saying, hey, we talked about this, but they forget to put the details of the step-by-step instructions involved in that in-service. You can say, yes, we're doing the training. What proof do you have that not only did you do the training, but you followed up with the return demonstration or, to competencies to show that that technician knows what it is that they're actually doing?
Yeah, it's very scary for a hospital to have to defend itself against a lawsuit, especially with us on the inside knowing all the holes that can be in that type of documentation. It's in the processes and, even going to something as specific as on the day that this instrument was processed, did the technician have competency with this particular instrument? Were the IFUs not only accessible, but also known and actually done on this particular instrument? Like, you could get into the weeds there, but that's the type of true level of compliance, that's required of us, not only legally, but also ethically. And you're right, that's a big deal. And if that's what it is that is driving this push for more certification and push for schools to train these folks to be more competent, I think that's a good thing. To that point then, I did want to ask, kind of pulling back and looking at this big picture, how is the content or the curriculum for these programs decided? You mentioned microbiology earlier as a particular need. Are you pulling from a particular certification and building curriculum out of that? Or is it a more holistic approach? I was just wondering if you could take us through that.
Well, I originally got my certification with the CRCST through Isham and Certified Registered Central Service Technician. So that was my original certification that I had received. And the course of action as to what program we would be teaching, we looked at the other certifying body, I believe they're CBSPD, And it seemed to me that their curriculum and the topic were very similar to the CRCST course that was offered, the books that were offered by Isham. Where it really differed was the opportunity for those technicians to become certified readily. And the one organization, CBSVD, here in California only has 4 testing dates per year, and they're in different locations throughout the state. And California is a fairly big state. Where through Isham, they use the Prometrics group in order to be able to do the testing. And of course, that test, anywhere in the United States, especially here in California, is available in all locations within driving distance about 6 days a week, and in some areas, even 7 days a week. And so that played a part as to when we wanted the students to get their certification, we didn't want them to be delayed, because we knew that delaying of action of taking that certification test would have an impact on them in their ability to be able to remember the material. We encourage our students that within 30 days after graduation, take that exam, because that's when the information's most fresh in your mind. The other thing why we chose Isham is that the original program that we started with was the 7th edition, and they had all the PowerPoints, the different games that were associated with it. It's kind of like a Jeopardy game that was involved. It allowed us to be able to put our own personalities in and our experiences and integrate it with their course to be able to give the students the knowledge they needed to prepare them for the certification. But we'd also be able to put in our information of what we experienced in the job into it as well, to prepare them what to expect when they got into the field, because we didn't want people being blindsided. Because, in sterile processing, we've had a bad rap over the years where some ORs have not really valued what it is that we brought to the table, and it's been a battle to change that. But ultimately, when you let the students know exactly what to expect, they're able to face that challenge when they get to it. Because we'd also tell them this is exactly what to expect, but this is why. For instance, anybody currently in the field knows that a nurse can call down and yell at you because they didn't have something went wrong in their case. So we need to tell the students right off the bat, hey, they're not yelling at you. They're yelling at the situation. They're communicating with the doctor through their communication at yelling at you to let the doc know that, hey, I'm taking you serious. See, I'm yelling at the person downstairs. Our job is then to turn that around and say, okay, what's the issue? What do you need? How do I solve your problem right now? And to let the students know ahead of time, if you expect this and you are presented with that opportunity when somebody's yelling at you, you can be that fixer, that consummate expert to be able to turn around and solve their problem for them, and then turn around and actually increase our visibility in the field, as well as to service recovery for the customer, and, in the end, have a better relationship with our customer.
Harry, that's really good advice on kind of setting that 30-day time limit, because I know when I was a manager trying to encourage my technicians to go ahead and schedule their tests and take it, I had several technicians who would be ready to go up until that point where it was time to actually schedule the test, and then the test anxiety would hit. And so I would have several technicians who would, they were ready for months before they would actually schedule their test. So having that 30-day recommendation is very good information. So when we're looking at sort of these training programs, what are some of the, average lengths and costs that a hospital or a technician can expect?
Well, let's say from the student's point of view, the cost of going in and what to expect from these schools. Well, I know here in California, the cost is a wide range. There are several schools available that teach the same program that we teach. It starts off at around $8,000. And I was just told today by somebody who actually called me to sign up that they found a school that wanted to charge them $32,000 for this, the same course that we're charging for. And so at one point it used to be $8,000 to $14,000. Now I'm being told, some school wants to charge $32,000 for this course, and I'm just like, I don't understand why. Now, from our point of view, or from what we offer to our students, the cost is only $2,500, and we're able to do so because of we control our cost. We utilize conference rooms at hospitals or community centers in order to be able to pass on that savings. We didn't start the school to get rich, so to speak, in the beginning. We did it because we actually didn't like the attitudes that students were coming to us at our facilities to do their training. They kind of had a chip on their shoulder and the sense of entitlement. And it was like, where is this coming from? I mean, we're opening up our doors and teaching the hands-on experience to these students for free. We're not charging the school. They're not paying us to let students come in here. And so myself and a couple other managers, we really were disheartened with the attitude. So that's why we started Central Sterilization Solutions, was to open up our doors and be able to train students with the proper attitude of a sense of service. Why are you in this field? Why do you want to become a sterile processing tech? Most of the other schools, when they go through and they give you an aptitude test to see what it is, when you go in to say, hey, I'm considering going to school, miraculously, they have other programs available. And unfortunately, instead of actually sending them to a sterile processing course, they tell them, hey, you tested out really well. You're qualified to take the surgical tech program. They charge $32,000+ for that. And unfortunately, what they don't tell them is that about 90 to 95% of you will never make it into the OR. You'll end up spending your career in sterile processing. Our school does not do CNA programs. We don't do OR technicians. We concentrate solely on sterile processing. And so we opened up our doors again to be able to teach them what they needed to do. Going back to money, yes, of course we want to make money, but that wasn't our primary focus. We got tired of the different attitudes that were coming into our field, and we're trying to change the culture. And that's how we started. And I don't foresee us changing anything in the near future.
My mind is just absolutely blown that somebody is out there asking for $32,000 for a certification course. And it really just leads us into the next question, which is, how can we tell a reputable program from one that is clearly disreputable? And in that case, I would call them predatory for focusing in on people who are desperate to break into an industry, desperate to get some marketable skills, and then hitting them with an absolutely ridiculous bill for, something that should not even cost anywhere near that amount. How do we tell the difference between those two programs?
I get students calling all the time, and I have staff members that when they take the calls, I've trained them to basically teach these students what it is that they're looking for. First of all, the students need to know when they're going in and they're looking for a program, they need to do more than just ask questions on, hey, what is the cost? What is it that you guys do? They need to perform their due diligence when researching the school. So they should not accept the word of any representative from any school at face value. And that includes my school. I tell them, you know what? You need to do your research. I'll give them names of the other schools. Part of what I do is I let them know, they said, hey, when you call these schools, this is what you can expect. This is how they'll probably respond to you. But honestly, I really want you to go out and research other schools other than us. I've had people say, you're kidding. No, I'm serious. I really want you to research it because I don't want anybody, signing up for our school and at the end feel that they've been taken advantage. So some of the questions that they really need to be asking us as well as the schools is, number one, how long have you been in business? Number two, what guarantees do you have that I've paid my tuition? Because I've actually even seen individual instructors who will open up a program in an area, accept the money, give the books, and then they disappear. Then another question is, who is in charge of the sterile processing program? Are they approved to teach the program? A lot of students, they'll ask questions about, is the school accredited? So I educate them and let them know, well, the course itself that we teach is accredited. Now, the instructors at our school, such as myself, we're approved by Isham to be able to teach the course. And so I tell them, call up Isham. This is their number. Tell you what, give them my name. Ask them if I'm approved to teach this course. And they'll tell you yes. I said, but if you call them and say, hey, I'm thinking about taking a course from Harry Mullen, what kind of instructor? They're going to say, who? And if you call and say, what can you tell me about Central Sterilization Solutions? They're going to say, we've never heard of them. Because Isham doesn't want to be sued, or they take a stance. We don't recommend any school. We don't recommend any program, with the exception of Purdue, of course, because they've worked hand in hand for years. But as far as the individual instructors and our schools, they just don't go there. So they need to ask the school, because I've called up schools myself and said, are you accredited? Is your sterile processing program accredited? And they'll go, yes, it is. And I'm like, really, who's it accredited by? One said, well, it's CBSPD. And I'm like, well, they're not an accrediting body. And, well, we have Isham. Okay, well, they're not an accrediting product. So you're approved by them? Well, no, we're not approved. When you really push them, they'll tell you the truth. A couple more questions real quick. Do you help with job placement, or how do you prepare me for the interview? Can I sit in the class and audit the course before I decide to sign up? And can I talk to some of your current or past students about their experiences with the schools? That's just the tip of the iceberg as far as some of the questions that I can come up for them. And if any one of those answers cannot be answered, then they really need to consider not going to that school.
So, Harry, do you think that Isham should perhaps start keeping lists of recommended programs? Or I'm a little torn here on the whole kind of claiming neutrality on schools when we know that there are some out there that are, like I said before, predatory, or there's no quality standards on what they're actually providing.
I've talked to the head of their education section of Isham, Natalie, and I know that we've had long discussions. And so I've come to understand their position. They're faced with dealing with lawyers. They're talking to their lawyers, and they're like, you don't want to be sued. You don't want to be liable for any misrepresentations or things of that nature. But yes, I do think they need to step up to the plate and say, okay, we know there's a need. We know that there are reputable individual instructors as well as schools that are teaching this program that are doing their best to adhere to our standards. What they should be doing, instead of necessarily saying, well, here's a list of schools and or instructors that you can go to, how about helping the instructors find an accreditation program or an accrediting body? And I've looked for them, and I've called around the schools to get accredited for their surgical tech programs, and they come back to me and say, well, yeah, we do surgical tech, but we've never done sterile processing, and we wouldn't even know where to go from there. And so I get turned down, and I'm still faced with trying to find out, well, how do I go about getting the actual school accredited as opposed to the instructors just being in an approved status? Eventually, I'm thinking what we're going to end up doing is when we get big enough is we'll go to the state of California and then submit ourselves to be, a technical college and change our status and stuff and go through that process. But unfortunately, when we go there, I think some of our costs will go up. But I refuse to ever go charge as much as any of the other schools because it's just ridiculous. But I think they need to put steps in place to help these schools to be able to answer those questions about accreditation.
You mentioned the surgical tech programs, Harry, and they have that relationship. Obviously, they need it with hospitals and that partnership or collaboration so that people get hands-on experience. Can you talk just in the last question of part one here about the relationship and collaboration of training programs in that similar mold, but for sterile processing training programs, and how you partner with SPD departments to help people that are maybe taking this program and aren't working in a facility today?
We've been actually very fortunate. Our program started in 2011. And I have to be honest, at that time, we had zero affiliation agreements with any hospitals at all. And of course, back then, we weren't charging $2,500 for a course either, because we were just starting it out. We were taking baby steps. We wanted to make sure that we were teaching a quality program before we charged more. So what we ended up doing is advising our students to reach out to their local hospitals, contact the volunteers office, or contact a sterile processing manager and ask them what is the possibility of being able to do their hands-on experience in there. And actually, we had a few hospitals, and is it all right that I mention some of them?
Sure.
The very first one was the Veterans Hospital in Long Beach. The volunteers office immediately, as soon as the first student we sent in, or that decided to go there, instantly was like, yes, we can help you. Put them in touch with the SPD manager, and within a matter of, it took about 6 weeks to go through their background checks and the physicals and all that. And so the student called us back up and said, hey, I just started here. We're like, really? How did you approach them? And then at one point in my career, I went in as the interim director over at Keck Medical USC. And my very first day, I walk out of my office and I bump into one of my past students. And we both do that double take looking at each other. And at the same time, we both said, what are you doing here? And it was funny because it was like stereo. And I said, no, seriously, you first. What are you doing here? She said, well, I'm volunteering here. What are you doing here? I said, well, I'm the director. And I'm like, so you're volunteering? How did you do it? And so with Keck, it's very strict schedule as far as how students have to go in there. They're very particular. If you go in there right off the bat to the volunteers and say, hey, I'm a student, I want to do my hours, they'll say, nope. But if you go in there and say, I need to volunteer, I need to, what do I have to do? When's your orientation? And then they go through the process. And slowly but surely, that's how we started getting the affiliation with those hospitals. And then started happening out in the Inland Empire in Riverside County, where we had students volunteering elsewhere. And then finally, the hospitals reached out to us because they were like, well, we've taken your students, but there's a liability issue, and we really need an affiliation agreement. And then slowly, we said, okay. Then when they sent us a contract, we just signed it. I mean, I'd read through it, but I signed it. They're like, you don't want to change anything? And I'm like, frankly, I'm just happy that you're allowing us to send our students to you. We'd be happy to do so. The first affiliation agreement, the tough thing was they're saying, but you have to carry the liability insurance for the students. No problem. We did it. We found an insurance company that would do so. We started off with like a $1 million policy. And then slowly, as we got more affiliation agreements, we actually had one hospital reach out to us and call us because they had hired a past student of ours, thought that they were such a caliber that they first reached out and said, hey, do you have any alumni? Yes. And I turn around and say, hey, is there any possibility that we can get an affiliation agreement with you? And they said, if these are the type of students you're going to be sending to us, absolutely. And so we entered into that. The liability insurance, of course, has had to go up with each hospital, but it was well worth it. And as a matter of fact, I have 2 affiliation agreements that I just signed the other week for out in Riverside County. So, and I'm sitting there going, why is this happening? I'm just dumbfounded at times because it's not like I'm really pushing to get with these hospitals. Thank God for students. They're dedicated, and they're looking for them in their area, and they're bringing them to us. And the hospitals are more than willing, because when they first talked to us, we're very adamant. California, I swear to God, 25 years ago, you could throw a rock and hit a hospital that would allow a sterile processing tech to do their hours, no problem. But because of liability issues, because of mistakes that were made, managers were actually using students as technicians to do the work, and nobody was checking their work. And so the OR started stepping in and saying, no, we don't want students in our facilities anymore. And where other schools are still having a hard time getting students in, luckily for us, we're having hospitals open their doors to us because we're very adamant as far as the training program to say that you have to train them this way. We have our proctors go in and oversee to make sure that the training is being done the way we want it to do, have it done. And then we want to make sure that, because a lot of these hospitals are unionized. And so the union's really concerned that, well, are these students taking over, work that should be done by our technicians? And it's like, no, they handle the trays, and guess what? The trays have to go through the process again for your technicians to put it through, because none of the trays that our students do ever make it up to the OR.
It's interesting, Harry, too, because in the part 2, we're going to talk about California hospital requirements for SPD techs. And it's interesting. That's really where your service got born out of a need. And you are just a couple steps away from really being a technical college all on your own. And in part 2, that's a great segue, because that's what we're going to talk about, from certification to graduation, and is the next step higher education. So be sure to join us next week for part 2. That was Harry Mullen, Manager of Sterile Processing at Riverside University Health System and Director of Operations for Central Sterilization Solutions. In part 1, we talked a lot about sterile processing training programs, why that need is there, how that need is developing, and an overview of the typical lengths and costs of the programs. I know, Mike, you're going to go right to it, but geez, some of the costs are just outlandish for the training of these programs.
That is exactly where I was going, because I would just recommend anybody who is thinking about partnering with one of these organizations, go back and re-listen to Harry's response on, how to differentiate between a good program and a predatory program, because we've seen this not just in California, but in other places where these colleges and technical schools or whoever it is just kind of pop up and start offering the certification course with no real benefit to the student at all. Instead, they just get saddled with a whole bunch of debt. If nothing else, I would say go back and re-listen to that part. That was great information.
And we talked about the why of sterile processing programs and a little bit about the where, geographically speaking. Obviously, if you're in a state that requires certification at the state level, it makes sense to have a lot of these programs around to provide that supply into hospital systems. But also, if you're in a geography that has a lot of hospitals that just require it as a matter of quality, and of course you're going to need somebody there to be pushing those students your direction. So I agree with Harry that this is a trend that we're going to see growing over the years. I am interested to see what the future holds in terms of litigation, if that will drive more of these schools to pop up quicker, and if that argument will be made maybe more in the courtroom instead of the C-suite. It remains to be seen, but either way, a very interesting conversation today with him, and I'm excited to get into segment 2 again later on.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Be sure to join us next week for part 2 with Harry Mullen. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And if you do have any topics that you'd like us to cover on a future episode, or if you'd like to share a picture anonymously on our Instagram page, just send an email to info@beyondclean.net. On behalf of Hank, Mike, and myself, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond Clean.